I've never been the kind of person to meddle in other people's business. As a nurse, I've seen too many tragedies to know that stepping in at the wrong time, for the wrong person, can cost you everything, even your life. But that day, in a single heartbeat, I threw myself in front of a man I barely knew, a stranger I'd only spoken to once in a cafe. And I never could have imagined that the bullet meant for him would completely change my life. Or that the man whose life I saved would hug me in a hospital bed and thank me with a check for $1 million US. I'm not telling this story to be a hero. Honestly, I never thought anyone would notice me. I'm just a regular nurse, working 12-hour shifts, commuting by bus, living in a tiny apartment with an old cat and a fridge that buzzes louder than the TV. But maybe it's because my life was so normal, that the day everything changed felt like something out of a movie. It was a rainy Sunday morning. I wasn't on shift. The sky was gray, and the city felt quieter than usual. I stopped by my favorite cafe for a latte. He was sitting in the far corner, sunglasses on, flipping through a book like he wasn't reading a word. I wouldn't have thought twice about him, if it wasn't for the way his hands trembled slightly when he reached for his coffee. The way he exhaled like he was carrying the weight of something far heavier than he let on. And then, the gunshot. It tore through the quiet hum of the cafe like lightning through glass. Screams. Chairs falling. Panic. And I didn't think. I moved. I ran toward him. Before I knew it, I felt a searing pain rip through my shoulder. Everything spun. But not once did I regret it. Because when I looked back at him, he was safe. And the look on his face, it wasn't fear. It was disbelief. Like no one had ever saved him before. The next thing I remember was the sound of sirens and the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I was still conscious when the paramedics arrived, ironic, considering I'd spent the last 5 years being the one in their shoes. They were saying things like gunshot wound, through and through, pressure here, but all I could do was turn my head to make sure he was still there. He was. And he was holding my hand. I didn't even know his name. They rushed me into surgery. I drifted in and out of consciousness, not sure what was real and what was morphine-fueled dreaming. But in the quiet hours of the hospital night, when the machines beeped softly and the pain dulled to a throb, I finally woke up to find him sitting by my bed. No sunglasses this time. Just a tired man with haunted eyes and a voice softer than I expected. "You saved my life," he said. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. He handed me water like he'd done it 1,000 times. Then he said something that made me think I was still hallucinating. "I'm Nicholas Ashford." I blinked. I knew that name. Everybody knew that name. Billionaire. Tech mogul. The kind of man who owned buildings with his name in gold letters and had a net worth bigger than some countries. But there he was, in my hospital room, holding a paper cup of water like a worried husband. "I'm sorry," he said again. No one was supposed to get hurt. He didn't leave. Not that day. Not the next. He came back every morning, always in the same dark coat, always with coffee. I never asked why. Part of me didn't want to know. The other part was afraid to ruin the quiet connection forming between us. He didn't talk much about what happened. But eventually, the truth came out. He had been targeted. Not by some random mugger, but by someone who knew who he was, someone trying to make a statement, or maybe send a message. The bullet had my name on it, but it wasn't meant for me. "I wish it had been me," he said one day, voice barely above a whisper. "Don't say that," I told him. "I'd do it again." And I meant it. The strangest part? He never once acted like a billionaire. No arrogance. No entourage. No bodyguards. Just a man who couldn't stop staring at me like I was some kind of miracle. He brought me flowers that he picked out himself, joked about hospital food, helped me comb my hair when I couldn't raise my arm. One afternoon, he pulled out a folded check from his coat and placed it gently on the table beside me. "I want to thank you properly," he said. I looked at it, then looked at him. $1 million. I laughed. Out loud. It was the kind of laugh that came from disbelief, exhaustion, and a touch of fear. I don't need your money, I said. He leaned forward. It's not about money. You saved my life. That doesn't come with a price tag. But if this can help you in any way, it's yours. I didn't take the check that day. Not because I didn't need the money, God, did I need it, but because something about the way he said it made me pause. It wasn't transactional. It was something else. Like he was trying to pay off guilt more than gratitude. And for some reason, I didn't want him to feel guilty. I didn't want to be another problem in his already complicated life. Keep it, I whispered, pushing the envelope gently back to him. Come back tomorrow instead. That's enough for me. He stared at me, stunned. Like I had just done the one thing he didn't expect. And he did come back. Every day. We fell into this rhythm: coffee, conversation, soft smiles, and the sterile scent of the hospital. I told him about my cat, the noisy fridge, the dream I once had of opening a free clinic in my old neighborhood. He told me things I don't think he'd ever told anyone, about the pressure of legacy, about people pretending to care, about nights he couldn't sleep because of all the what-ifs. I didn't treat him like Nicholas Ashford, the billionaire. I treated him like Nicholas. Just Nicholas. And I think that's why he stayed. One night, weeks later, I was finally cleared to go home. He offered to drive me. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to be near him, but because I was scared. Scared of what this was becoming. Scared of what I was starting to feel. Scared that once I left the hospital, he'd vanish, like a dream I was never meant to remember. But he didn't vanish. He helped me up the stairs to my apartment, ducking under the flickering hallway light and pretending not to notice the peeling paint. I expected him to leave right after, but he lingered by the door, hands in his coat pockets, nervous in a way I'd never seen. This is nice, he said, glancing around my tiny living room like it was a museum. I laughed. Don't lie. It's a shoebox. Yeah, he said softly. But it feels real. I didn't know what to say to that. So instead, I asked if he wanted tea. He stayed until midnight. And when he finally stood to go, he turned to me and said, I'm not just grateful to you for saving my life. I think you might have saved me from something else, too. Days turned into weeks. He kept visiting. We'd go on long walks, him in a hoodie and sunglasses, me still healing, still figuring out how to process this new reality. He never pressured me. Never made grand gestures or declarations. He just showed up. Every single time. But life isn't a fairy tale. And good things, in my world, always come with a shadow. One afternoon, I got a phone call from the hospital director. A journalist had caught wind of the shooting, and more importantly, of the man I'd saved. Suddenly, cameras were waiting outside the hospital. My name was in the papers. They dug into my background. My job. My student loans. Even my mother's obituary. And then the questions came. Was I dating him? Was I after his money? Had this been staged? I broke down in my bathroom. Curled up on the cold tiles, arms around my knees, tears I didn't even know I was holding back pouring out of me. I didn't want fame. I didn't want money. I just wanted my life back. Nicholas showed up later that evening. He didn't say a word at first. Just sat beside me and rested his hand on mine. His touch said more than anything words could. I'm sorry, he said finally. This is my fault. No, I whispered. You didn't ask me to take that bullet. But you did. And I'd do it again, I said, choking on my own voice. He looked at me, and for the first time since that day in the cafe, I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of death. Not fear of headlines. But fear of losing something, someone, he didn't know how to live without. I don't want to hide anymore, he said. Then don't, I replied. And he didn't. He called a press conference the next day. stood in front of flashing lights and microphones and said the words I never thought I'd hear. "She saved my life," he said. "And I'm not going to let the world ruin hers for it." He didn't stop there. He donated $10 million to trauma centers across the city. And then, without blinking, he set up a foundation, under my name, to fund clinics in underprivileged communities. And yes, he gave me that $1 million check again. This time, I accepted. But by then, I knew something for sure. It wasn't the money that had changed my life. It was him. The check sat untouched on my kitchen counter for days. Every time I walked past it, I felt a mix of disbelief, guilt, and awe. $1 million. Enough to erase my student debt, move out of my shoebox apartment, and finally open that free clinic I'd dreamed of since nursing school. But more than anything, it was a symbol, not of charity, but of trust. Of how far we'd come from that single, shattering moment in the cafe. Nicholas didn't mention the money again. He never asked if I cashed it. Never hinted at what he expected in return. In fact, he rarely talked about himself at all. But slowly, I started learning him through the quiet things, the way he always sat with his back to the wall in public places, the subtle way his jaw tensed when his phone rang, the silence that settled over him whenever the news mentioned violence or corruption. One night, after dinner, a quiet takeout meal eaten on my couch between two stacks of laundry, I finally asked, "Why were you there that day?" His eyes flicked toward me, then back down to his hands. He was quiet for so long, I thought maybe he wouldn't answer. "I was supposed to meet someone," he said softly. "A business partner. Someone I trusted." My stomach turned. I already knew where this was going. They sold me out. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. But instead, he continued, "I met you." He reached across the cushions, fingers grazing mine. Maybe that was the real reason I was supposed to be there. After that night, something shifted between us. Not instantly. But undeniably. He started staying later. We'd talk for hours. About everything. About nothing. He met my cat, who, for the record, bit everyone except him. He fixed the light bulb in my bathroom. Taught me how to play chess. Helped me carry groceries. It was as if he wanted to blend into my life without ever making it about him. But one night, I caught him staring at me with this look, this deep, searching ache in his eyes, and before I could ask what was wrong, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't rushed. It was quiet. Soft. Like a question. And I answered it. The weeks after that were blissful. I had never felt more alive. More seen. More safe. But even in the warmth of it all, I knew something was coming. Something always did. The fairy tales never lasted forever. And sure enough, one morning I woke to find Nicholas gone. No note. No call. Just silence. Panic bloomed in my chest. I called. Texted. Nothing. Hours passed. Then a full day. Then two. On the third day, I got a call from a blocked number. "Don't go to the clinic," the voice said. "Don't talk to the press. Don't trust anyone who says they work for me." It was him. Nicholas. His voice was calm but tense. Controlled. "Someone inside my company's been leaking information. The same person who set up the shooting. I can't protect you unless you disappear for a few days." Disappear? I laughed. "Nick, I'm not a spy. I'm a nurse. I have patients. They'll be fine without you for 1 week," he said. "I won't be." That night, I left my apartment with a duffel bag and no plan. He'd arranged everything, a car, a safe house just outside the city, groceries already stocked in the fridge. I felt like I was in a spy movie. Except there were no weapons, no secret missions. Just me. And the echo of his voice in my head. On the fourth night, I couldn't sleep. I stood on the balcony, watching the moonlight stretch across the fields, and for the first time, I let myself cry. Why was I doing this? For a man I barely knew 3 months ago? And yet, I had never known anyone more deeply. The next morning, I woke to the sound of tires on gravel. I grabbed my phone, heart in my throat. It was him. Nicholas. But he looked wrecked. Disheveled. Exhausted. He didn't even say hello. He just pulled me into his arms and whispered, "It's over. They're gone. It's safe now. And then, I missed you." I held on to him like my life depended on it. Because in that moment, it did. And when we finally went home to my tiny apartment with its creaky floorboards and too small kitchen, I looked around and realized something. It wasn't just my life that had changed. It was his, too. The billionaire who once lived behind glass walls and armed gates had found peace in the sound of an old fridge and a cat that refused to love anyone. And I, a nurse with nothing but a scar and a stubborn heart, had found something worth more than any check he could ever write. The days that followed felt like stolen time. Like we had escaped the chaos, just barely, and were now holding our breath in a world that didn't know what to do with people like us, a nurse who had nothing, and a billionaire who'd nearly lost everything. But we didn't talk about money, or the headlines, or the chaos that had tried to break us. We just lived. We went grocery shopping like a couple who'd been together for years, arguing over cereal brands and sneaking chocolate bars into each other's carts. He kissed me in the checkout line, right in front of an old woman who raised her eyebrows and smiled. He cooked me breakfast, burned toast and overly runny eggs. I pretended to love it. He knew I was lying, and grinned anyway. But late at night, when we were wrapped in silence and skin, I could feel it in his touch, that quiet desperation to hold on to something real, something gentle, something that didn't have a price tag. That something was me. One evening, as I sat curled up in the corner of the couch with my cat in my lap and him reading beside me, he closed his book, turned to me, and asked, "Do you ever regret it?" I looked at him, confused. Regret what? Jumping in front of that bullet. I paused, then smiled softly. No. Because that bullet gave me you. He didn't say anything for a moment. Just stared at me like I'd handed him a truth he didn't think he deserved. And then, he reached into the drawer of the coffee table and pulled out a small, velvet box. My heart stopped. He opened it. Inside was no ring. Just a key. "To the new clinic," he said, eyes gleaming. "We bought the building last week. Renovations start Monday. It's yours. Fully funded. Staffed. Equipment ready. It'll open under your name. The Carter Wellness Center." I covered my mouth. Tears spilled down my cheeks. "I didn't know what to get the woman who gave me a second life," he said. "So I figured I'd help her save a few more." The Carter Wellness Center opened 4 months later. Nicholas insisted on standing behind the scenes during the ribbon-cutting ceremony. "This is your moment," he said, nudging me forward. "I'm just the guy with the wallet." But he was wrong. He wasn't just the wallet. He was the reason I could look at a city full of pain and believe again. The reason I believed in myself. In love. In miracles. He was the man who taught me that sometimes, the most unexpected people can change your world, not with money, but with presence. We never had a grand wedding. One morning, he just looked at me over a cup of coffee and said, "Let's do forever." And I said, "Okay." We married in the clinic's garden. Just a few friends. No reporters. No luxury gowns. I wore a white sundress and walked barefoot through the grass. He cried as I said I do. I laughed as he forgot half his vows. The cat was our ring bearer, and, true to form, bit the photographer. It was perfect. Not because it was fancy. But because it was ours. And now? Well, I'm still a nurse. Still working long shifts. still cleaning up messes and wiping tears and holding scared hands. But now, when I come home to him. To love. To peace. To a life I never saw coming, all because of one impulsive, reckless act of courage in a quiet cafe on a rainy Sunday morning. So if you're asking me what changed everything, it wasn't the money. It wasn't the bullet. It was the moment I stopped thinking, and simply did what felt right. And sometimes, that's where the best love stories begin.